We have a crisis in the world, tremendous crisis, and also crisis in our consciousness, in us. I see the urgency of change, radical revolution, mutation in the mind. I see it. It is necessary. There is complete quietness of the mind, and that which is silent has vast space. Only then that which is nameless comes into being.
This is Urgency of Change, the Krishnamurti podcast. The self is nothing but words and memories. So the self is the past, and to know oneself means to observe yourself. Hello and welcome to episode 245 of Urgency of Change. Each episode of the Krishnamurti podcast features carefully selected clips from Krishnamurti's talks. The aim is to represent different aspects of Krishnamurti's radical approach to many of the issues and questions we all face in our lives. This week's theme is the self. Upcoming themes are concentration, inquiry, and duality. This is a podcast from Krishnamurti Foundation Trust based at Brockwood Park in the UK, which is also home to the Krishnamurti Retreat Centre. Situated in the beautiful countryside of the South Downs National Park, the Krishnamurti Centre offers retreats individually and in groups. The focus is on inquiry in light of Krishnamurti's teachings. Please visit krishnamurticenter.org.uk for more information. You can also find our regular quotes and videos on Instagram, TikTok and Facebook at Krishnamurti Foundation Trust. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review or rating on your podcast app, which helps our visibility. This week's episode on the self has 5 sections. This first extract is from Krishnamurti's 5th talk in Madras 1978 and is titled The Nature of the Self.
We have to investigate together into the question of what is the self, the me, the ego, the entity that identifies itself as being separate from another. If you will, we're going to go into that to find out whether one can lead a daily life which is not based on you and me. Me first and you second. Our whole culture is that. Social, moral, ethical, religious, and so on. Right? Is it somewhat... Can we go on with it? What is the self, the me, the ego? How does it arise? What is its inmost nature of the self? Inmost, very depth of it. Is that very structure, the nature of the self, fragmentary? Or is there, in the very structure, in the very essence of it, a quality which is not fragmentary? You're following all this? I ask because, please sir, I ask because I'm not sure we are meeting each other. Please sir, I'm not sure we are communicating with each other. I rather doubt that we are. Because it's a very serious thing that we are investigating. Because man has always lived with sorrow and acquainted with grief. Whether it is possible to end that sorrow, not in some distant future, but in our daily, actual life now. And also whether it's to find out, not intellectually or verbally or emotionally and romantically, the nature and the beauty of love, what is the depth of it, the meaning of it, the fullness of it. And also, what is death? So it's very important, it seems to me, that we examine together, share together, walk together, investigate together this question, which is, what is the nature of the self, the identity of a particular individual, opposed to the community, opposed to the many, and what is the inmost nature of the self? Without speculating, without asserting, without accepting the traditional verbiage. I'm using the word verbiage, it is just words. So we are together. Please bear in mind, we are together exploring. So you are not just sitting there and listening to the speaker, but actually working with him. That means you will have to give your attention. You have to listen to each other. Though all of you can't speak, and I am the only person that unfortunately speaks at the moment. In sharing, we have to be very alert, watchful, heeding that which is being said and our response to what is being said, and how we receive or accept or listen to what is being said. All this, the responsibility of those of you who are willing to listen seriously. May we go on? If the self, the me, is put together by thought, then whatever it does at the highest so-called conscious or superconscious level is still fragmentary. Right? If it is not put together by thought, the me, the ego, the self, then it is something sacred, inviolable, unalterable, something that is beyond time. So we are questioning these two factors, whether it is put there, the nature and the structure of the me, the ego, the self, by thought, and therefore fragmentary, and whatever it does, however it might imagine, long for, hypnotize itself, that it is the whole, that it can perceive the whole, it can come upon truth. Either that is a total illusion and deception, and if the self, the me, the ego, the you, is something that is not of type, that's not born of thought, then it is capable of perceiving totally the nature of truth, that which is beyond words, which is not measurable by words. So these two are factors we must examine, right? So we are trying to find out the inmost nature of the self. Because all our activity is based on self. The me first and you second. In all our relationships. In all our bureaucratic activities, social activities, in our in our relationship with each other. The self, the self-centered activity is constantly in operation. Even when we are meditating, even when we are supposed to be religious and all the rest of it. Right? So, what is the self? Unfortunately, most of you probably have read philosophy, sacred books. I won't call them sacred because they're just books. Or somebody has told you, your guru or your religious leader probably has told you the self is something extraordinary. It's to live everlastingly from the beginning to the end. So we're asking a very simple question, which is really tremendously complex. How you approach that question matters a great deal. Whether you approach it with fear, you approach it with a conclusion, or accepting the authority of others, and your approach then is already limited, circumscribed. To investigate, one must be free. Otherwise, you can't investigate. Right? If you are prejudiced, if you have some ideals, some conclusion, some wish, then that very wish, conclusion is going to dictate your investigation. So can you, if I may ask, be free to go into this matter very carefully, logically, sanely, and freely to find out the nature of the self and the inmost essence of the self. Because if the self is merely the operation of thought put together from the very beginning of time, then death has certain meaning. If it is not, then death is a beginning. We'll go into it. The individual, the identity of a human being who feels or thinks he's separate, is he actually separate, though his form, name may be different? His idiosyncrasies, his characters, his a peculiar, if I may use the word without being misunderstood, genius. Peculiar genius, not in the great sense of the word genius. Peculiar eccentricities, tendencies, qualities. Are they the result of culture, the culture in which you are born, the development of character as a resistance to the culture, which may be the idiosyncratic outlook on life? So this is very, very important for us, if I may point out over again, to go into. So first, what are you? Your activity is based on the self. Self-centered activity from morning till night. So, what is that center from which you are acting? The center from which you are meditating, if you meditate, and I hope you don't. That center from which all your fears, all your anxieties, sorrows, griefs, pain, affections arise. That center from which you are seeking happiness, enlightenment, God, or truth, or whatever you like. The center from which you say, I take a vow to be a monk. The center from which, if you are in business, trying to become more and more and more powerful, more money. That is the center which you are examining. The self. What is that self and how has it come into being? That is, to know yourself. You understand? That is, knowing yourself as actually what you are, not what you think you are, what you hope to be. But the self and the knowing of that self, whether it is possible to know it completely with the essence of it, and whether it's possible to go beyond all the fragmented activity of the self. Right? So is the self, that center, put together by thought. Please think, investigate reason as though you are, for the first time you are thinking about it. Then it is fresh. Then you can investigate. But if you say, well, I already know what the self is, I already have come to certain conclusions about it, you will prevent yourself from examining it. Right? That's fairly simple. So what is the self? You, what are you? Not who you are, but actually what are you? There is a difference between who you are and what you are. I don't know if you see semantically the meaning of the two. The one, when you say who you are investigating somebody, leading further and further away from the center. But if you say what you actually are, what is, then you are dealing with actuality. The actuality is that which is actually happening. Right? You will see it in a minute. So, what are you? You are a name, right? A form, the result of a society, a culture, which has emphasized throughout the ages that you are separate, something indefinitely identifiable. Right? You have your character, your peculiar tendency, your character, either aggressive or yielding. Is that not put together by the culture which has been brought about by thought? Right? It's very difficult for people to accept a very simple, logical examination. Because they would like to think the self is something most extraordinary. We are pointing out the self is nothing but words and memories. So the self is the past. And to know oneself means to observe yourself, actually what you are, in our relationship with each other. Then the reactions of the self come out, right? In our relationship, intimate or not intimate. Then you begin to see what you are. Your reactions, your prejudices, your conclusions, your ideals, your this and that, all that. Is not all that a result? Right? Are you following? That which is a result has a cause. So is the cause a series of memories, remembrances, and so a center that has been created by thought, to which thought clings.
The second extract is from the fourth talk in Saanen 1985 and is titled Self-Interest.
Is it possible to live in this world without self-interest? What does self-interest mean? What are the implications of that word? How far can we be without self-interest and live here in the bustle, the noise, the vulgarity, the competition, the personal ambitions and so on and so on? We're going together find out. Right? Self-interest, you know what that word means, so I don't have to explain it. Self-interest hides in many ways, hides under every stone and every act, hides in prayer, in worship, in having a good profession, in having great knowledge, in having a special reputation like the speaker. When there is a guru who says, I know all about it, I'll tell you all about it. Is there not also self-interest there? One may be an expert, an specialist, skillful, and there is this seed of self-interest. It has been with us for million years. Our brain is conditioned to self-interest. And if one is aware of that, which means just to be aware of it, not to say I'm not self-interested, it is wrong, it's right, how can one live without all the arguments and pros and cons. Just to be aware how far one can go, how far one can investigate into oneself and find out for ourselves, for each one of us, how far in action, daily activity, how far in our behavior, how deeply can one live without a sense of self-interest. So if we will, we'll examine all that. Because self-interest divides. Self-interest is the greatest corruption. The word corruption means to break things apart. Rompere, to break. And where there is self-interest, there is fragmentation. Your interest as opposed to my interest. My desire opposed to your desire. My urgence to climb the ladder of success opposed to yours. So, where there is self-interest, just observe it. You can't do anything about it. You understand? Just to observe, to stay with it and see what is taking place. If you ever dismantled a car, as the speaker has done, and the car ran afterwards. If you ever have dismantled a car, then you know all the parts. You know how it works. And you learn all about it. Not merely get into a car, drive off. I'm talking of 1925 cars. Of that period, they were very simple, very direct, very honest, strong, beautiful cars. And when you know something mechanically, then you can feel at ease. You can know how fast to go, how slow, etc., etc. So if one knows, understands, aware of our own self-interest, then you begin to learn about it, right? You don't say, I must be against it or for it, how can I live, who are you to tell me myself, etc. If when you begin to be aware, choicelessly, not say, well, this is my self-interest, but to be aware choicelessly of your self-interest, to stay with it, to study it, to learn it, to observe all the intricacies of it. Then you can find out one can find out for oneself where it is necessary, where it is completely not necessary. Right? It is necessary to live daily, right? To have food, clothes and shelter, and all the physical things. But psychologically, inwardly, is it necessary is there a necessity to have any kind of self-interest? You understand my question? That is to investigate relationship, right? You understand? Because in our relationship with each other, there is mutual self-interest. You satisfy me and I satisfy you. You use me and I use you. I sell you, you sell me down the river. Right? You understand all? We, in our relationship, is there self-interest? This is important to understand. Because, I don't use that word, it's silly. To find out if there is self-interest in our relationship, where there is self-interest, there must be fragmentation, breaking up. Right? I am different from you. Self-interest. What is relationship? Relationship to the earth, to all the beauty of the world, to nature, and to other human beings, and to one's wife, husband, girl, boy, and so on. What is that bondage? What is that thing that we say, yes, I'm related? You understand my question? Please investigate this thing together. Don't please rely on the description that the speaker is indulging in. Let's look at it closely. What is relationship? And when there is no relationship, we feel so lonely, depressed, anxious, the whole series of movements hidden in the structure of self-interest. What is relationship? When you say my wife, my husband, what do you mean by When you are related to God, if there is God, what does it mean? So that word is very important to understand. I'm related to my wife, to my children, to my family. Let's begin there. That's the core of all society, family. In the Asiatic world, family means a great deal. To them, it's tremendously important, a family. The son, the nephew, the grandmother, grandfather. You understand? It is the center on which all society is based. So, when one says my wife, my girl, my friend, what does that mean? Most of you probably are married, or a girlfriend, or a boyfriend. Right? What does it mean to be related? What are you related to? When you follow a guru and say, I am following him, what are you following? You understand? Let's move for a second from the wife and husband. And we'll come back to it a little later. You might rather not like to investigate that question, husband and wife, girl and boy, but we can approach it more quietly. When you follow somebody, guru, a prophet, when you follow the speaker or some other person, politician, and so on, what is it you are following? What is it that you are surrendering, giving up? You understand? Is it the image that you have created about the speaker, or the guru, or the image that you have in your brain that is the right thing to do, and therefore I'll follow it? You understand? Is it the image, the picture, the symbol that you have built, and that you are following that, not the person? You understand? Not what he's saying. The speaker has been talking for the last 70 years. Right? I'm sorry for him. And he has established certain, unfortunately, some reputation. And the books and all of this. So you have created naturally an image, a reputation. And you are following that. Not what the teaching says. Right? The teaching says don't follow anybody. But you have the image built, and that you are following that which you desire, which satisfies you, which is of tremendous self-interest, right? Now let's come back to the wife and husband and all the rest of it. When you say my wife, what do you mean by that word? What is the content of that word? What is behind the word? You understand? Look at it. Is it all the memories, the sensations, pleasure, pain, anxiety, jealousy, all that is embodied in the wife, right? Or in the husband. The husband is ambitious, wants to achieve a better position, more money, and the wife is not only remains at home, but she has her own ambition, her own desires. So there they are. They may get into bed together, but the two are separate all the time. Right? Let's be simple with these facts and honest. And so there is always conflict. One may not be aware of it, so no, we have no conflict between us. But scrape that little bit with a heavy shovel or with a stapel, and you'll find there the root of all this is self-interest, right? And the self-interest may be in the professionals. Of course there is doctors, scientists, the philosophers, the priests. The whole thing is this, which is sensation, desire, fulfillment. Right? We are not exaggerating, we are simply stating what is. Not trying to cover it up, not trying to get beyond it or anything. There it is. That's the seed in which we are born, and that seed goes on flowering, growing till we die. Or there is a control of all that. You understand? Controlling the self-interest. That very control is another form of self-interest. Yeah? How cleverly self-interest operates.
The third extract is from Krishnamurti's 8th talk in Saanen 1964 and is titled Self-Pity.
Sorrow for most of us is the beginning of self-pity. And to understand anything, there must be ruthless operation of all self-pity. I do not know if you have observed yourself how sad you become moment you begin to say, how I am like this, how too bad. Moment there is self-pity, you have given the root to sorrow. And you justify that self-pity, rationalize it, give it all kinds of nuances, polish it, cover it up with gold ideas, but it's there. Deep down. So a man who would understand sorrow must be free of this brutal, self-centered, egotistic triviality, which is self-pity. Self-pity, whether you are diseased, whether you have lost somebody, whether you have not fulfilled, whether you are empty, dull. Self-pity is the root of it. And then you can look at sorrow, neither worshipping it, nor escaping from it, nor giving it an extraordinary spiritual, sublime significance, that you must suffer to find God, which is utter nonsense. It's only the dull, stupid mind that puts up with sorrow. So there must be no acceptance whatsoever of sorrow. Not the denial of it. No, not the acceptance of it. Then you have deprived sorrow of all sentimentality, all emotion. Sentimentality, emotion spring from self-pity. And then you are able to look. And I hope you are doing this with me this morning. Not verbally accepting what is being said, but actually being aware of one's own state, the state of acceptance, the state of rationalizing, the excuses, the self-pity, the sentimentality, the emotional attitude towards sorrow. Because all that is a dissipation of energy. To understand sorrow, you must give your whole attention to it. Your whole attention. That means in that attention there is no place for any deviation. No excuses, no sentiment. No rationalizing. Therefore, no self-pity whatsoever. I hope I'm making myself clear when I talk about this attention. In that attention, there is not the shadow of trying to resolve sorrow, not trying to understand it. Every form of effort to understand, to rationalize, to escape, denies completely that attention, that negative state of attention with which, or in which this thing called sorrow can be understood. We are not analyzing sorrow. We will little bit. Not analytically investigating and thereby getting rid of it. We're not doing that. Because that's another trick. Another trick of the mind that analyzes sorrow, thinks it is understood and is free of it. That is sheer nonsense. It'll come up in another form. You may get rid of one kind of sorrow or another, but we are talking sorrow as a total thing, whether it's yours or mine or of a human being. There is sorrow as such. So, To understand sorrow, there must be the understanding of time and thought. And becoming choicelessly aware of all the escapes, the self-restrained, purposeful self-pity, all the verbalization, so that the mind, in understanding all this, becomes completely quiet in front of something which it has to understand. So, there is no division between the observer and the thing which is observed. It is not that you are in sorrow, that you as the observer, as the thinker, looking at sorrow, feeling sorrow, but there is only the state of sorrow, not you in sorrow. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. That's necessary. Otherwise, when you look at it as an observer, sorrow, you create conflict. And therefore dull the mind. Therefore your energy is dissipated. And so there is no attention. So, the mind now, having understood the nature of time, thought, the root of self-pity, sentiment and all the rest of it, then thought, which has created all this complex, that has come to an end, therefore it's capable of looking at it. Therefore thought being absent, and therefore no time, therefore you are directly, intimately in contact with that thing which you call sorrow. And only when there is an escape, a desire to resolve it, a desire to worship it, to run away from it, then only sorrow is sustained. But when there is nothing of that, but the mind is directly in contact and therefore completely silent with regard to that fact, then you will see for yourself that the mind is not in sorrow at all.
The fourth extract is from the seventh talk in Saanen 1974 and is titled, Is There a Higher Self?
Can you learn from another? Can you learn from another what is the real meaning of meditation? Volumes have been written about it. People have meditated according to a particular system, Zen, or the Hindu systems of many varieties and models and methods of system. The content of all those imply an end to be achieved through control. Right? Control implies a controller. Please follow this little bit. And is the controller different from the controlled? You understand the question? They say the whole meditative groups and their systems and their philosophies, their breathing, they say, control your thought. Because thought wanders about. And the wandering about is a wastage of energy. And therefore, thought must be absolutely held, disciplined, subjugated in the pursuit of that thing. Enlightenment, God, truth, what you will. Jehovah, the nameless, all that. That implies a controller, obviously. Right? And who is the controller? Is he different in quality, in nature, from that which he says he is going to control? You're following all this? Please, this is very important to understand this. Because what the speaker wants to point out that one can live completely in daily life without any control against all the traditions. You understand? Against all your education, your social model behavior. So he says, live a life without absolutely no control. But that means you have to understand very, very deeply who is the controller and the controlled. And this part of meditation. Is the controller different from that which he is controlling, which is thought? Some say the controller is different. He is the higher self. Please listen to all this. He is the higher self. He is the part of higher consciousness. He is the essence of understanding, the essence of the past which has accumulated so much knowledge. So, the whole traditional and the gurus and the swamis, the yogis, all of them say control. Right? They have never asked who is the controller. They may have asked it, but they have translated, yes, the controller is the Supreme Self, which is still within the field of thought. However much thought may be elevated, it is still within the area of time, measure, which is thought. Right? Do please see this. See the truth of this. Not the verbal acceptance of it or the intellectual comprehension of it, but the truth of the matter. That all the gods, Christian gods and the Hindu, all of them are the invention of thought. And thought can project itself into all kinds of states, into all kinds of illusions. And when thought says there is the higher self, it is still within the field of thought. Therefore, the higher self is still matter. I wonder if you get this. So, controller is the controlled. Right? Do see this. Therefore, the whole aspect of meditation changes. And what is the meaning of meditation? The meaning of meditation is objective, not my personal opinion, judgment, evaluation, dogma, experience, none of that. Meditation means the emptying of consciousness of its content. Then only can the mind and the brain be absolutely quiet. That absolute, not relative, absolute quietness is necessary to observe, not to experience. Right? Please see all this. Most of us want experience. Experience, which we've had, sensory experiences, sexual, every kind of experience we've had. And thought desires more experiences. An experience of another state, of another dimension. Right? Because we are fed up with this world and its experience. They are boring. They have a limitation. They are confined, narrow. And we want an experience which is totally different. Right? Now, to experience involves recognition. Right? You're following? If I don't recognize, is there an experience? I've had the experience of looking at a mountain, the beauty of it, the shadows, the lovely deep blue of an early morning, the whole sense of something extraordinary, magnificent. And that experience cannot exist if there is no relationship to the past. Right? So, experience implies recognition from the past. Obviously, it's so simple. So, mind wants to experience something supreme. And to recognize it, you must have already had it. Therefore, it is not the supreme. You understand? It is still the projection of the mind, of thought. So meditation is a meditation in which there is no experience. Follow that. Because in that, there is no element of time.
The final extract in this episode is from Krishnamurti's 7th talk in Saanen 1973 and is titled Emptying the Mind of the Activities of the Self.
Meditation is the emptying of the mind of all the activity of the self. Now, will it take time? Do you understand? Will the emptying of, or rather, I won't use that word emptying, you'll get frightened. Can this process of the self come to an end through time, through days, through years, or is it to end instantly? And is that possible? You're following all this? It's part of your meditation. When you say to yourself, I will gradually get rid of the self, that's part of our condition. Right? Because when you introduce the word gradual that involves time, a period, and you enjoy yourself during that period, you understand? All the pleasures, all the feeling of guilt which you cherish, which you hold on to, and the anxiety which also gives you a certain sense of living, all that. And to be free of all that, you say, it will take time. And that is part of our culture, part of our evolutionary conditioning, and so on. Now, will it take time? Time being psychologically emptying, putting an end to the activities of the self. Will it take time? Or it doesn't take time at all, but a new kind of energy must be released. Please listen to me. New kind of energy must be released, which will put aside all that instantly. You understand? You understand my question? Look, I know myself. I'm greedy, envious. Oh, I've got enormous guilt about some silly thing which I have done, and I cherish that guilt because I have nothing else to hold on to. And I'm ambitious, all that. Now, to be aware of all that, both conscious as well as unconscious, it looks obviously that I need time to peel off layer after layer and go through all that. My mind, which has been conditioned, says, I need time. That's obvious. I need time. And so I'm going to take many years over it. Gradually. That means I may die, never putting an end to the activity of the self. So I see there's something very false in it. Right? So what is to be done? Does the mind actually see the falseness of that proposition that you need time to dissolve the activities of the self? Do I see clearly the falseness of it? Or intellectually I feel, yes, it isn't quite right. And therefore I go on with it. If I see the falseness of it, actually, then it's gone, hasn't it? Time is not involved at all. Time only is needed when there is analysis, when there is inspection or examination of each broken piece which constitutes the me. All that requires, if I allow time, analysis, and so on, so on. When I see the whole movement of this as false, untrue, has no validity, though man has accepted it as inevitable, then because the mind sees the falseness of it, it ends. I wonder if you see this. Look, sir, if you saw a precipice, when you are near a precipice, there is no question, unless you are rather unbalanced, insane, and then you go over. But if you are sane, healthy, you go away from it. That the movement away from it doesn't take time. It's an instant action. Because you see what would happen if you fell, if you fall. So in the same way, if you see the falseness of all the movement of thought, the analysis, the acceptance of time, and so on, then there is instant action of thought as the me ending itself. Now, so you see what meditation is. What relation has meditation with that which we have called religion? We said religion is not, under any circumstances, the worship of another, the worship of a savior, the image, the belief, the dogma, the priest. All that is not religion. Any intellectual human being accepts that, logically. But at the moment of death, he says, yes, I am a little frightened, I'll accept all that. You watched that, haven't you? So religion is not that. For that is based on fear, punishment, and reward. Then, what place has meditation in a religious life? We have accepted a religious life as poverty, chastity, obedience to an image created by thought, whether it is the image of 2,000 years or 10,000 years, the image made by hand or by the mind. And that is not religion. Religious life then is a life of meditation in which the activities of the self are not. Right? And one can live such a life in this world every day. That is, I can live a life, as a human being, one can live a life in which there is constant alertness, watchfulness, awareness, attentive mind that is watching the movement of the self. And the watching is watching from silence, not from a conclusion. You understand? Because the mind has observed the activities of the self and sees the falseness of it, and therefore the mind has become extraordinarily sensitive and silent. And from that silence, it acts. You understand? In daily life. Have I conveyed anything of this? Not conveyed, sorry. Have we shared this together? Because it's your life, not my life. It's your life of sorrow, of tragedy, of confusion, guilt, reward, punishment, play, all that's your life. And if you are serious, you have tried to untangle all this. You have read this book or followed that teacher or listened to somebody. And yet the problems remain. So we are saying these problems will exist as long as the human mind moves within the field of the activity of the self. And that activity of the self must create more and more and more problems. And when you observe, when you become extraordinarily aware of this activity of the self, then the mind becomes extraordinarily quiet, sane, healthy, holy. And from that silence, our life in everyday activity is transformed. So religion is the cessation of the me and action born of that silence. That life is a sacred life. You understand? Because it's got full of meaning.